before we bring up our next speaker for today's event, our keynote speaker has done justice to that topic of turning pain into purpose. And in our next session, it's going to focus on limited access to specialized services and support, a reality faced by many families across the continent. How do we access specialized services? So we are honored to be joined by our speaker, that is Helen Oshikoya. Helen Oshikoya is the founder and the CEO of Nobelova Gradani Psychoeducation Services. Helen brings to this forum a deeply grounded perspective shaped by years of hands-on work with families navigating limited and uneven access to autism services. Her voice reflects realities that are often discussed in theory, but lived daily by parents across Africa. She speaks to long distances families must travel to access basic services, to the scarcity of trained professionals, to unclear referral pathways after identification, and to interruptions in care that leave families discouraged and sometimes, or most times, uncertain. Helen reminds us that access is not simply about whether services exist on paper. It's about reach. It's about whether families can realistically get there. It is about continuity, whether support is sustained over time. And it is about reality, reliability, whether families can trust that care will not suddenly disappear. Her work highlights the emotional toll of navigating systems that require parents to constantly start over, constantly re-explain and re-advocate. Yet it also reflects perseverance, creativity, and deep commitment to meeting families where they are. This session calls for practical, context-aware solutions that prioritize families' realities, reduce barriers, and build systems that are both accessible and sustainable. It is my pleasure to welcome you and take it from here, Helen.
Hi, good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here. And thank you. Thank you. And thank you for that wonderful introduction. I'm here, I would say, in the capacity as not only a behavior analyst, but also as a lawyer. And I will give my perception in both context to allow parents to actually understand why there's a difficulty in accessing services. Now, let me just come down to a parental level. One of the major reasons why, beyond professionalism or non-professionalism, that parents are unable to access services is the parents themselves. Denial. Denial is a very, very strong motivating force that prevents parents from actually even seeking help, whether it's there or not. There's so many times when a parent will come for an assessment with me, and I'm actually telling the parent what is obtainable. And the parent will literally tell me, but that's not for my child. That's not for my child. And we also have to remember that in Africa, we don't have what they call negligent parenting system. Come and take your child away because of immense denial. We find out that a lot of children are not able to get the services, whether they're there, because the parents refuse to accept that there is something wrong with the child. And in that context, we look at how government can also help. How does government help? Government should start having what they call standardized screening processes so that even if you are in denial, the government is able to screen the child and let you understand that you are in denial, but you are compelled to actually seek help for this child. because you are the advocate of your own child. The second one is taboos and stigmatization. We find out that a lot of parents, whether they're educated or whether they are enlightened or whether they are pillars of the society, they still embed themselves in traditional taboos. They don't want to discuss about the fact that children have this challenge and they need to be supported. I remember when I started about 15 years ago, and I was telling parents that part of what I do is mental health checks. And they were like, oh, how can children be mentally ill? And I tell them that children are actually legally classified as mentally ill from the age of 7. Your child can be classified as being mentally ill as early as 7. And then we also know that autism is a neurodevelopmental disorder. So it comes out of the umbrella of physical illnesses and sits right at the tip of mental health disorders, which definitely are in the psychiatric realm. Parents did not want to hear about psychiatry. Parents did not want to hear about anything that is actually going to be tainted as if the child has a psychological challenge. But you see, one thing I tell parents is that even if you don't want to accept, society will make you accept eventually, because the child will become so unmanageable and so impaired that you have no choice but to cry out for help. And by that time, it's too late. Early intervention starts early. And, we have I'll give an example. With Down syndrome can actually be detected from birth. But two things will happen. Parents will say, no, my child cannot have Down syndrome. Or they will say, it's not possible for my child to have Down syndrome. And then they neglect what that child needs. Because in the society, we still refer to children with Down syndrome as imbeciles. So you can imagine the parent at the back of their mind doesn't want to accept, because the child will be stigmatized as being an imbecile. And I know for sure, because when grandparents come to me and ask for advice and they have a child with Down syndrome, they never say Down syndrome. They say, that my grandchild that is an imbecile. So you see, those are some of the things that parents try to avoid, even though the reality is staring them in the face. And the only way that that can be reduced is in a situation of advocacy. So parents that are in that situation need to be the advocate for their own child. You can't just put your child inside a cupboard and cover it and expect that you are not going to be able to do what you need to do, because you feel society has a particular perception. Because society has a particular perception of what your child is or is not. We do school health screenings in a lot of schools. And even in those schools, I have parents saying to me, why do these children have to be in this school? After all, they're special needs schools that they can go to. Yes, they are special needs schools they can go to. But why send a child to a special needs school when you can provide intervention early enough for them not to meet the criteria of special educational needs schools? It's not as if they're not going to have special education within the school setting. But why must it have to be in a special needs school? Because what is required to be in school is school readiness. So if you have a child with autism, for instance, and intervention has taken place, and the child has school readiness criteria, why does he have to be in a special needs school? So you see, even within the educated setting, you have parents who are educated, who sit down and create those barriers without even thinking about the fact that so many children have this challenge. More children than we ever anticipated. Sometimes I sit down in my quiet moment and I say to God that, did you actually prepare me for what I have to do right now? Because if you had told me in my early teens, when I was becoming a lawyer, that I would be doing this today, I would say it's totally impossible. And that's why people that have actually come into this space, it is a personal calling. And we have to continue advocating for these children. No matter how bad or no matter how good, we have to have a burden for them. And the only way that they are going to be able to access the right services is if we professionals continue having a burden to make sure that the system and the systems applicable are right. We can all sit down in our own quiet corner and say, oh, that doesn't concern me because it's not my problem, but we all have this problem. Another reason why services are not accessed is affordability. Affordability. It has become extremely expensive for parents to access this service, especially in Nigeria. I don't know about other countries, but in Nigeria, because the government doesn't subsidize. The government doesn't subsidize. But on the other hand, it costs a lot to become professionally qualified. And because we don't have a local body, we still have to do our training in Forex. We still have to do our training, our keep up our certificates in Forex. And then considering the fact that the foreign exchange is becoming more and more less obtainable. So when you are costing your services, it becomes almost impossible for the average person to access. Now, is that a problem that we created? No. Is it our fault parents can't afford it? No. But we always, as providers, have to be able to rob Peter to always pay Paul. You have to have a minimum access that parents can be able to afford. Is it going to be enough time to do the intervention? Maybe not. But sometimes it's still better to access something small than not access at all. So we as service providers need to put ourselves in a position whereby we don't become unreachable. Because in Nigeria currently, the average Nigerian, as in low-income Nigerian families, they can't access services. They can't. There was a time that we were providing for the lower caliber or those that are that can't afford, but they wouldn't come because they didn't want the stigmatization. They didn't want the labels. So therefore, they didn't access the service. And then we find out that you've employed people to take care of that caliber of citizens, and they're not accessing it. So what do? You let them go, and then you sit down and wait for those that can afford it. Is that the right attitude? Maybe. Is it the wrong attitude? I'm not sure, but unfortunately, it is a situation that we find ourselves in as service providers and also as parents. Now, for instance, if you have a child that has a multi concerns, so the child's, for instance, let's say the child has cerebral palsy, for instance, so he needs physiotherapy, he needs speech therapy, he needs OT. And then by the time you add all those costs, it becomes totally impossible for the average person to afford it. And I know that this is not a challenge peculiar to Nigeria alone. It is a challenge peculiar to a lot of African countries. And that's where I go back to providers. And I say to service providers, I have 50 to 60 children. Is it not better for you to have a minimum cost for 50 children, make an impact on 50 children, as opposed to having 2 to 3 children that are paying premium? Because eventually, that premium parent will leave you because they feel that they can get a higher premium somewhere else. And then your business is struggling. Your business starts struggling. As opposed to if you had keyed in and collaborated with somebody that has loads of children, break even in your costs. That is paying your salaries, paying your overheads, paying your this. And even if you make little gain, yeah, but that little gain is sustainable over time. A lot of people ask me, why do I have so many kids? I'm going into almost 200 kids, blah, blah, blah. I am also a behavior analyst. I can do this. My programs are this. They are better. Da, 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 da. I ask them, look at your costs. The reason why I have so many is because my gains are little. You have to ask yourself as a service provider, are you in this to make money? Or are you in this to make impact? Because if you make impact, you will make money. But if you're in for the money, I'm so sorry, you're not going to go anywhere. So service providers have to really sit down and ask themselves, are they in it to really, really help, excuse me, or are they in it for their own selfish gain? Now, some will ask me, excuse me, some will ask me, but it's a business. Are we not supposed to make profit? And then I ask them that if every business, look at companies in the UK, you have Edinburgh and Son, then you have Edinburgh and Son and Co. Those businesses did not sustain themselves because they are profit driven. They sustain themselves because they are impact driven, because they want to make an impact. And that is why the name is able to stay over time. You have businesses that start off in 2022. That is even ABA businesses. By 2023, 4, 5, by 2025, I'm just giving an example, they're non-existent. And you see the business collapsing, excuse me, over time. And that's because their priority was to make money and not to impact. So that in itself makes it difficult for parents to access services, because the people they want to access service from are only interested in profit. Excuse me. Are only interested in profit. I'm so sorry, I have a cold, but let me just. Thank you. Now, another thing that causes inaccessibility. Excuse me. Can I just take a minute to just
All right. Okay. Stay with us on the line as she grabs some water and she will rejoin us. So be patient.
Okay, I'm back. I had to just get a sweet because okay, so now another thing that prevents us from actually accessing services is cost. This is for the providers now. Cost of training. So it's extremely expensive to become a behavior. I'm looking in the context that I wouldn't even look at it only in the context of a behavior analyst, but in the context of a service provider, whether an occupational therapist, whether a speech therapist, whatever, it is expensive. So those that can actually afford the training become limited. So a lot of parents are limited in the ability to access those trained people. So now you have what they call, I would call them mini-me's or duplications, or we call them, in Nigeria, we call them 7-Up, you know? They call themselves clear, but they're not actually clear. So what happens is that those guys come in, they flood the market, they start promising parents all sorts of things, and then parents believe what they are saying. And because parents want the best for the children, they actually access those kind of people, and eventually all they do is waste money. So is it their fault, these quacks, is it their fault that they can do that? To a large extent, I don't blame them. You know why? Because government is not regulating, government is not taking those things that concern those kind of children seriously. Because if somebody can misrepresent themselves and call themselves what they're not, and people just don't bother to call them out, we're going to still continue being in this situation. You need to call them out. But you see, in calling them out, a lot of parents don't even know what the right ones are. So if you ask a parent today, who takes care of a child on the spectrum, the parents will probably say occupational therapist, or the person will say physiotherapist, or the parents will say lesson teacher, or the parent will say a shadow, a facilitator. So parents don't even know the hierarchy of care that is required for each disorder or each discipline that is affecting the child. They don't know. So a parent that has a child on the spectrum, they'll say, I need OT, I need speech, I need physiotherapy, I need this, I need that. I need this, I need that. And then the parent says, I need all these things. I have to have them. They tell me that if I don't have them, my child is not going to be better. They go into panic. And then what happens, the doubts or the people who aren't qualified capitalize on that. I've had people call themselves speech therapists and have not entered the rooms of a classroom before. And they're speech therapists. They're speech therapists. And you know what? For some peculiar reason, you get more speech therapist quacks because parents feel that if the child is talking, the problem is solved. So anybody who is ready to tell the parent, I'm a speech therapist, will be most likely able to defraud the parent than somebody who's a behavior analyst. Because if you tell a parent, I'm a behavior analyst, they'll be like, but my child doesn't have any behavior problems, even if the child is on the spectrum. So you find out that more parents are duped by fake speech therapists than they are by behavior analysts, because the parents' driving force is that they want the child to talk. They feel that once the child is talking, their problems are solved. So you have parents going from one fake speech therapist to another fake one, to another one, to another one. Then they'll do online, then they'll do offline, then they'll do all sorts, because they believe that speech therapy is the solution to the problem. I always look at autism as a house. And you know, in a house, you have different windows. You have windows in a house. Now, ABA is the door. So the ABA goes through the door. But if you open the windows a little bit, you find out that the speech wants to come in. The OT wants to come in. The occupational person wants to come in, right? But you find out that if the windows are all shut, and the behavior analyst, well, the ABA person goes through the door of autism goes through the door, and then in the right time, the behavior analyst lifts each door, each window open. So child is ready for speech. That speech window is open. The child is ready for OT. That OT door is open. But the problem is that everybody wants to get into this house
at the same time.
Forgetting that the house you need to go through the door. You have to go through the door. You can't continue going through the windows. And that's why they say autism is a disorder that likes misery company, so to speak, in the context that everybody is ready to go through the window, the cracks, and everything when it comes to child on the spectrum, because there are multiple challenges with the child, and everybody feels they have an equal right to that autistic child, even though they are not qualified to access that child's problem. And it still goes back to education. It still goes back to awareness. It's like I tell my colleagues, everybody knows about autism. Everybody knows about CP, but nobody knows the professionals that are meant to handle each different disorder that a child has or comes across. You have people that would tell you, child on the spectrum, oh, it's a facilitator the child needs. I tell my colleagues, invest your time in educating the society on what are the professionals that are meant to address each particular disorder that you know. If it is only autism, you know. Advocate, oh, there's behavior analysts, there's technicians, there's this, there's that. You go for an assessment, you go for a diagnosis. Service providers don't do that. All they want to do is conferences, autism. But there's more to autism. There is the access. I have a child on the spectrum. How do I access services? A lot of parents don't know, because we, as providers, a lot of us don't educate the public about what is required. Who are the people to take care of your children? Who are this? Who are that? Yes, you may hear it in one seminar, you may hear it in one conference, but are we consistently drilling it into the society to say this is what is required? This is what is required. And because we're not drilling it and we're not investing in that area, it becomes hard for parents to access the service because they have no clue. All they know is the child is on the spectrum, and that's it. And then we also have to look at the fact that our countries, African countries, we need to start rising up and having our own bodies, our own certification bodies to reduce the cost that is heavily labored on us by international bodies. I know a lot of people that want to become behavior technicians. I'm fortunate and I'm blessed to be part of quite a few international bodies. And I always appeal to them to reduce the cost of the exam and the access. And they've been wonderful, but it still doesn't, it's still not enough. You're looking at the average in Nigeria, the average earnings of a person who wants to become a technician is less than $20 a month. 20, if possible, with the fall of the naira. And yet you have a training that a coursework they want to access. So for instance, my organization, if you want to be a behavior technician, it's everything is free. Your training is free, your supervision is free, everything is free. The only thing you pay for is your exam. And that is highly subsidized. And in the subsidy, I still have to source for the Forex to pay. But how many organizations can do that? And how many organizations would get staff that are committed? Because a lot of challenges service providers have is they train and people leave. They train, and so they have a consistent turnover of training, departure, training, departure. But then I say to them, it's not so bad for me because I'm a lawyer. I can create a contract and I can enforce it. But not everybody has that legal skill. So maybe if we start focusing on maybe like a government sort of board certification setting so that you can choose, do you want the local board setting, which is just as fine as the international, or do you want the international? But you see, we Africans are also, we're racist in the sense that if you have a local behavior analyst certificate and somebody has an American behavior analyst certificate, what's going to happen? You go with the one with the American. Because you obviously feel that they are better trained or they are trained well. So we also, to a large extent, contribute to this problem. It sounds funny, but it's the truth. So we're always going to have this problem, whether we like it or not, until we're able to rise up beyond certain colonial thinking, so to speak.
Mindset.
Colonial thinking. Yes, mindset. Yes. So the fifth and the last one, why people can't access services, is very, very critical, and that is government. Government have not made it, they've not put in what it requires for people to access. And that's because governments, most African governments, don't appreciate and they don't realize the magnitude of children that have this challenge. In schools currently in Nigeria, you're looking at almost 20 to 25% of children with a neurodevelopmental disorder and autism being the highest amongst them.
It's massive.
Yes, yes. So you can have a classroom of 15 children, 8 are on the spectrum, and just 1 teacher and 1 assistant. I can say this categorically because I test. I'm a school tester. And in the last 15 years, I've tested close to almost 100,000 children. And within the last 4 years, the prevalence continued to creep up. In fact,
I think we lost the volume there. Are you still there, Helen? Um, that might be network. Are you there, Helen? Are you still there, Helen? Okay, while we wait for her to rejoin us, I think she might be having issues with her connection, but let's be patient. I believe she will rejoin us. While we wait for her, she has been speaking to us on um, limited access to specialized services and support. She has been dissecting the things or the barriers that parents face in accessing care and support for their children and for the families with children living with autism. And these barriers stem from the barriers parents create for themselves and the ones that the systems create. So both personal barriers and systematic barriers. She's mentioned barriers like denial, parents not being able to accept reality on ground and seek help on time. Another thing she talked about is access to standardized screening process where the government has failed to standardize the screening process and make it compulsory that parents seek help for their children, because it's not just all about the parents here. It's about the children being able to assess the care and support they need on time. She also talked about what we are familiar with, which is the taboos and the stigmatization that exist within African context, where some of these things are related to either spiritual attacks or one superstition or another. She has continued to talk on so many things that could hinder access or limit access. She talked about the service providers and the cost of training, which is high, and the tendencies of parents falling into the hands of 7-Up, as she termed it, because they panic and they fall into the hands of these people who are probably there just for the money or just to make money in the business. I believe that when she returns, she would continue to give us so many of how we can overcome these barriers and access the help that we truly need for our children. Okay, while we still wait for her, she also talked about how we can begin to redeem the cost of training for specialists in Africa. Because I don't think this is just a Nigerian issue where we all value certificates or certifications that come outside Nigeria. She was talking about how we can reduce the cost for these trainings, that make trainings accessible, because I believe that the more that the service providers are trained, or the more trainings they get, and the cheaper or more accessible these trainings are, the more it's possible to reduce the cost of accessing these services and getting quality service, not just the services. I think she's here with us. She has rejoined us. Helen, are you there?
Yeah, I'm so sorry. These are
It's
the hazards of Africa.
I
Okay.
understand.
Yeah. I'm so sorry. Okay, so I'm almost rounding up actually. Okay,
Yeah.
so we're talking about
Reducing the
access.
cost. Yes.
Yeah, reducing the cost. Yeah, so if the government supported more, so for instance, let me say in the Western world, quote unquote, you have that government also, supports a lot of the children that have this challenge. And then we will find out that a lot of parents don't mind the stigmatization and don't mind the label because they get funding or they get finance. But you see, in Africa, it's not like that for us. The government, if you want to access this kind of service, you have to go through the local government. And then with the local government, there is no real opportunity. And then you find out that your child that could have had a better opportunity has very little opportunity to become something because the access is not there. Because, government is overwhelmed. Government has a lot of they place a lot of emphasis on other things. They don't really place emphasis on this particular challenge. And the reason why is because it's lifelong. It's lifelong. They don't want to invest in something that has to be continuous over time. They want, okay, so for instance, a child that needs a wheelchair, a child that needs crutches, you buy the crutches, you pay for the wheelchair, and you don't really bother because cognitively wise, that child is probably going to be able to go to school, but it's just that they can't move around. There's nothing wrong with cognition. But when you're talking about things like Down syndrome, things like CP, things like autism, it affects cognition. And cognition investment with regards to skill acquisition, it's expensive.
That's right.
It's totally expensive. So they feel that they don't want to invest too much there because they can't sustain it long term. And that's where this early intervention keeps talking. There are a lot of people that says early intervention is the key. They don't even know what early intervention is. They just keep on saying early intervention is the key, early intervention is the key, early intervention is the key. And they just don't know what early intervention is. And that's because that early intervention hasn't been explained to them well enough for them to actually understand how early intervention can benefit them or the children. It's kind of like a double whammy in the context that you can't access service because government is not helping, and the service that you can't access is not really going to help your child. So you find out that parents find themselves in very, very difficult and peculiar situations, even though they want solutions or even though they want assistance for the children. And in all this, the summary of all this is if you are from a low income earning background or underprivileged background, you can't access services, not because you don't want to, it's because the yardsticks to get that services is so wide. It's not as if the services are not there. It's just that these things that I have mentioned have made it totally impossible. You know, some people think parents can't access services because it's not there. No, services are there, but there's so many barriers preventing them accessing it, even though it's there. Am I making sense?
Yeah, that makes
Because
sense.
to a large extent, every country, yes, to a large extent, every country, no matter how poor they are, they do have a small portion assigned to children with special education. I mean, I've not come across a country that doesn't, but that small portion, is it really enough to be able to give your child the quality of life that is required in the future? No, it's not. Even in England, in America, in Canada, government gives you the basic. If you want more, you have to add more. You have to top up more. But if you don't have more to add, most likely your child is not going to have the kind of services that another family who have access to can have. But then we also look at the flip side. Some parents have loads and loads of money, but the child's disorder is so intense and so advanced that all the money in the world will not be able to do much apart from maintain the child and keep the child comfortable. And then you have a poorer family whose child's challenge is not that difficult. It's just that they don't have the funds to actually access what the child needs. So it's like we're in the Bermuda Triangle, whereby we're just circling around with the hope that we don't get sucked up and disappear in that Bermuda space, because it becomes extremely difficult and frustrating over time, because you can see the services, but you can't access it because of your own certain barriers preventing you from accessing that service. But that notwithstanding, I always encourage parents that even if it is little that you can afford, go to a provider that is good and that will give you that little. It is still better than not having anything at all. It's still better than not having any access at all. So, on that note, I think I've been able to hopefully enlighten, encourage, and given a different perspective or a deeper perspective on why services are not being able to access, or the reasons why services can't be accessed as much as it should be, despite the fact that those services are there.
Wow. Wow, that it's been uh, a presentation that is filled with so much information. I just hope that we'll find out how, or break these barriers and access this support that our children with autism would need. There are questions, about 3 questions here. I want to thank you so much for coming in and helping us. One of the questions has been answered, I believe, but I think you can clarify the person. Tunde was asking, what barriers most prevent families from accessing autism services consistently? Like, what are the most, barriers that families face?
What
Barriers.
consistent
Most
barriers?
of them, what's the most barrier
Yes,
that families
yeah,
face in accessing this service consistently?
yeah, taboos
Taboos?
and finance and stigmatization.
Hmm. That's right. That's right.
Taboos. So
Go on, Mister.
yeah, taboo. Yes, I said taboos, finance, stigmatization. Those are the biggest barriers.
Yeah. Okay, another question from Zainab. Zainab said, how do families cope emotionally and practically with interrupted care? How do you suggest that families can cope, emotionally and, practical ways to cope with services that are interrupted or care that are interrupted?
I can't hear you. The line is cutting in and out.
Okay, if you can hear me, Zainab is asking, how can families cope emotionally? How can families cope emotionally and practically?
How can they cope emotionally?
And practically with this interrupted care,
Okay, so the thing about it is that, emotional support, right, has to be done really within the family setting themselves. And that's part of accepting. Then in acceptance, right, try and reach out to groups that actually have, platforms that actually encourage. What I tell parents is that you should have a discerning spirit when you join these groups. Some of these groups are actually not healthy, and they actually instigate more fear and instigate more challenges. But take the information these groups give you and then do your own research. Do your own research and then try to surround yourself with positive thinking people, people that will be, people keep on saying, nobody will understand. Yes, you're right. Nobody understands. But the truth of the matter is that if you don't continue reaching out consistently, you won't find somebody that will understand. So you just have to continue doing that. Look, surrounding yourself with good people, keeping your mindset clear, doing a lot of research, and also giving yourself a lot of knowledge, because knowledge is power. If you even feel that you want to take it a step further, you can do a training, do a certified training that will give you more in-depth, so that you're not so handicapped. Like 80% of the behavior technicians, behavior analysts in Nigeria, most of them have children on the spectrum, because they have decided to go beyond what was being provided. And with that, you're able to not only help your own child, but also help more people. I just continue encouraging parents. It's not an easy journey. It's not a journey that you would say you understand. The only thing is, surround yourself with people that are empathetic, not sympathetic, empathetic with you, so that they're able to come up and give you that moral support that you require. If you surround yourself with sympathetic, they're only going to be telling you, oh, so sorry. Oh, it shouldn't happen to you. Oh, it's this, and then make your problems worse. Empathetic are people that will put themselves in your shoes and decide to help you to unravel what you are experiencing as a parent.
Wow. Wow, that was a strong one. And the last question from Ibrahim. He's asking, in low resource settings, what realistic community-based solutions? What are the reality-based solutions to improve access in low resource settings?
No, the truth is that you just have to look for somebody that is actually interested in making impact and helping. So, for instance, like in my organization, we try to make it as affordable as possible. We're not an NGO, unfortunately, because we can't have an NGO and start looking for money, because we don't have the manpower to do that. But you can educate yourself more, look for service providers that are open to assist or open to do payment plans, or who can actually give you little or as much as you can afford, so that you're able to have something and be able to do something. It's like, for instance, we just got a speech therapist recently who's come from the UK. and parents are already saying that, oh, she's from the UK, there's no way I'm going to afford it. And I told them, I am doing it in such a way that every child will get, even if it's just a little, because I'll be heartbroken if she comes in and then parents that can't afford it will start seeing her and saying, oh, how I wish my child too can have a speech therapist from the UK. So you, as a service provider, has to be empathetic enough to be able to make your services in such a way that it's affordable to all. You always have to rub Peter to people. There are clients that can pay more. Leverage on those more to be able to help those that can pay none. You may
Yes.
not make a lot of money. Yeah, you may not make a lot of money, but I keep on saying it. If you are doing this thing, right, if it is what God has called you to do, you won't be rich in it, but you will have peace and He'll provide for all your needs. I mean, I've gone off what I'm supposed to say, but that is from my own personal experience.
Exactly. Exactly. Thank you so much. It's been an amazing time having you on this program today. We want to thank
Thank
you
you.
for giving your heart out and bearing it all on this platform. And the most
Thank you.
important thing I took out from the last part is that the role of family and circles cannot be overemphasized in getting that emotional support that we all
Yes.
parents need at this point. And lastly, you said something. You said avoid groups that might instigate more fears, or that will make you that will instigate fears and negativity, around you when
Yes.
you're seeking for support. And
Mm.
thank you so much for joining us.